Signal lost. Establishing connection. The Phantom Archive.
Welcome to the Phantom Archive. I am Nox, an archivist by trade, but by inclination, a storyteller. Tonight, I've prepared a selection of accounts for your consideration. So, try not to take them too seriously. After all, there is no need to lose sleep over a mere tale. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. This happened during one of my night shifts back in November 2020, still in the thick of COVID. Malaysia had closed their borders for about 8 months by then, and Singapore had just started easing a bit after the circuit breaker, a period of strict movement restrictions to avoid the spread of COVID. I worked at the borders of Singapore. During this period, there weren't many people on the ground per team, mainly to avoid any risk of spreading infection. If anyone gets COVID, the infected person and anyone in close contact will be required to quarantine for 2 weeks, so they separated the total strength of the workforce equally. Anyway, I was on the night shift that day. I was on my way to level 4 to collect my equipment. It used to be on the same floor as our lockers on level 2, which was nice. However, they moved it up due to social distancing measures. Since there was a lot of teams going to this one common room to draw out our equipment, they decided that it's better to split us all up, so some of us will be drawing at level 4, whilst others will be drawing the equipment at level 2. Makes sense from a safety point of view, but it's a bit of a hassle. Oh well, what can we do anyway? I would also like to point out that even before the social distancing measures was implemented, there weren't many people walking by that area. And with the reduced staffing, well, it's even quieter. When I entered the room, it was quiet, as expected. Many people came earlier to collect their equipment before me. I was amongst the last few. I made my way to my designated locker. My equipment locker just so happens to be near the balcony, which was separated by a glass door. During the day, you could see the bridge and the traffic building up, but at night, that balcony always gave me weird vibes. I always imagined that one day I would see something peeking through the glass. A head, maybe a figure, just standing there. But so far, there's no such thing. Thank God. I took my equipment and brought it to this tall standing table to check if all was in order. As I was checking my equipment, I felt my hair at the back of my neck slowly starting to stand on end. I felt a presence behind me that was slowly creeping up to me. I already confirmed I was the only one in the room, and in 2020, I haven't made any friends yet, even though I have been working there for a year. So, there's no way I have friends or anyone who want to play a prank on me. My heartbeat wasn't fast, it was just loud, steady but amplified. To make matters worse, I heard My heartbeat got faster and more erratic this time. The presence was steadily pacing up to me. I was fumbling with my equipment and trying to keep it in my equipment box. I had no time to properly close and lock my equipment box, so I just shut it and carried it out of the room carefully but quickly. As I was nearing the exit, the door swung open. I was startled and nearly dropped my equipment box. It was one of my colleagues. He probably thought that the room was empty because, you see, the door had this small rectangular window to peer in or out of the room, depending on where you were. So he probably took a quick glance and saw that it was empty, but as he opened it, he was understandably startled to see me rushing out of the room. So, the both of us had this awkward moment where we didn't know what to say or what to do next. Eventually, I gave him a nod and moved aside slightly to let him walk past me. He walked past me to his locker and I proceeded to the door. As I approached the door, I looked at the window on it and saw this woman in white dress, her long black hair covering her face. I was thankful that I couldn't see her face because God knows what kind of nightmare I would have if I could see her face. But as I continued walking forward, she moved slightly out of view and I couldn't see her anymore. But as I approached at this angle or distance, I was supposed to see her again. But she was gone. Just like that. It all happened so fast. So as I got closer to the door, I didn't open the door immediately. I pressed my face close to the window and peered out, looking to the left, then to the right. I didn't see anyone outside. After that, I slowly opened the door and peered to the right corridor, then to the left corridor. There was no one. She completely vanished. I paused for a while, trying to register what I saw, what I experienced. But I had a job to do in a few minutes. I just pushed the thought to the back of my head and proceeded to my deployment. We shall proceed with the next story. This happened years ago when I was still a kid, somewhere between 10 or 11, somewhere around there. You know how back in the day we played all those classic games at the void deck after school or during the holidays? Well, one of our favorite was block catching. Basically, it's like hide and seek, but instead of hiding in a small area or a single playground, we used the entire HDB block as our play area. Of course, we were kids then, so we didn't think about other people's well-being. We wanted to have fun, but thinking back, we were being very disruptive with our yelling, running. Basically we caused a lot of noise pollution for the entire residents up there. So the way the game works is someone gets chosen to be the seeker and the rest of us would go run and hide. And we're not talking about small groups here. Sometimes we had 10 or 12 kids. It started with just one seeker, but eventually someone complained that it took forever to catch everyone. So we bumped it up to 2 or 3 seekers. So basically we made it faster and easier. One particular evening I was picked to be one of the hiders. There were about 8 of us and we all scattered like roaches once the countdown started. You had about 30 seconds to disappear I sprinted straight up to the 12th floor, the highest floor in the block, and tucked myself behind some potted plants outside someone's flat. It had huge leaves and was the perfect spot to hide myself. Now begins the waiting game. I don't know how many minutes passed, but as the game dragged on, things got a little weird. At first, I didn't notice it. I was too focused on staying completely still and quiet. But then I heard something. A voice. Faint. Like someone whispering. Hakim. 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 It was calling out my name. My first thought was that everyone had been caught and I was the last one. My heartbeat was steadily getting faster. I was both scared and excited. Scared because I don't want to be found out, and excited because if the seekers couldn't find me, then I'll be moving around to another location to make it even harder to find me. Then I heard my name being called out again. Hakim. 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 Just softly whispering my name. Whoever the seeker was, they didn't want to give up on finding me. I carefully peeked out of the leaves and looked around to see if the coast was clear. But then I heard the faint whisper of my name again. Hakim. 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 So I continued hiding. I thought, was the seeker playing around with me? They are very persistent. Then I realized, hang on, do I know this voice? Do I know who this voice belongs to? I don't recognize anyone with that kind of voice. My first thought was that because people generally talk at a normal volume, and when they whisper, they may sound slightly different, so maybe that's why I couldn't identify who that voice belongs to. Perhaps somewhere inside someone's flat, someone's TV is playing, and coincidentally, the actor on screen, coincidentally might be calling out for my name. But again, that idea was a bit too far-fetched. And then it came again. Still soft, but it's a little bit more distinct this time. Hakim. 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 And you know what's the weird part? It sounded like it came from beside me. Why did the voice sound like it came from beside me? Then I felt a single thread brushing against my face. And then the thread grew more and more. I brushed it aside and grabbed a clump of it off my face. Puzzled, I noticed these were not strings, web, or thread. These were hair. Very long strands of hair. Knox, I'd like to mention that there was no space to my right because there are a lot of potted plants. Now, in front of me and to my left, there are space, obviously, but I would have noticed them because then I would have been caught. Now that leaves behind me, or in this case, over me. Behind me is basically a half wall, or what we would like to say a parapet. So unless you're telling me a kid is crouched or is standing on top of the parapet just messing around with me, I think that would be extremely dangerous because we are on the 12th floor. So what business does a kid have to do all of that, all that dangerous stunt just to mess around with me? It makes no sense. But that's the only explanation right now. So who was possibly over the parapet right now? I froze. Every hair on my body stood up. I didn't dare to turn my head. I just stayed crouched there, breathing as quietly as I could. I let go of the strands of hair and my legs started to shake. The feeling of dread washed over me. I knew something was very wrong, and I had to get out of there immediately. Before I could muster the courage to make a dash for it, I heard someone breathing down my neck. And then I heard it. You already know I'm here. Why aren't you running? That line completely broke me. I shouted at the top of my lungs something incoherent and bolted down the flight of stairs. I didn't care if I got caught by the seekers. I didn't care if I tripped down the stairs. I just ran down the stairs like my life depended on it. Better to bump into someone familiar, a seeker, a resident, even a stranger would do. Better a human than whatever that was. Throughout my entire time running down the flight of stairs, I heard a woman growling and the footsteps of someone chasing me. Of course, during my descent, I got caught on my way down. One of my friends, a seeker, saw me and shouted my name all happy like, "Aha! I got you!" But I didn't even acknowledge him. I just kept sprinting down. And then I think he got worried, or perhaps he just wanted to make sure I didn't cheat, so he chased after me. When we reached the lower floor, I was out of breath and my heart was pounding. I then realized that none of my friends got caught. I was the only one on the ground floor. The seeker who saw me caught up to me and asked what happened. It took a while, but I finally blurted out what happened between wheezes. He just stood there, wide-eyed, not knowing what to say. Later, when everyone had been caught and we regrouped at the void deck, he told the rest what happened. The mood changed instantly. Everyone just went quiet. No one dared to say a single word. No one wanted to go back up. Not that night, and not for a few days. Everyone suddenly had other things to do after school. When we started playing again, we made a point of never going up to the 12th floor. We even hide together in pairs. Even the seekers seek in pairs too. So depending on the number of hiders, we'd make sure the seekers were in even number, either 2 or 4. Eventually though, as with everything, people forgot, or maybe just stopped caring. We started playing again like normal, but not for long. Public complaints started rolling in, probably from the residents who were sick of us yelling and running up and down every other evening. Then, teachers began showing up after school, patrolling the block like some kind of neighborhood watch. Eventually, the fun died off after that. Slowly, block catching faded into memory. We shall close the books for this story. Let us examine the next account. This happened years ago when I was still doing part-time tutoring to make ends meet. Some parents preferred home tuition to sending their kids to the tuition centers. It was more personalized, they said. The kids get one-to-one attention, and we, home tuition teachers, can accommodate to each student's level of understanding and their approach to learning. Honestly, the parents are right, and I'd get extra cash from the one-to-one teaching. And there was this one student, a quiet boy, around secondary 2, if I remember right. Smart kid, not much of a talker. His parents were well off but lived in this old HDB flat. I guess you can't judge a book by its cover. Most of the well-off people I know love to flaunt their wealth. I guess these guys didn't feel the need for it. Anyway, they wanted me to come over twice a week for evening sessions. Nothing too late, usually from 6:30 to maybe 8:30, so it's not a big of a deal. Now, I'll never forget this one evening. I remember it was raining earlier, so everything outside was damp and the corridor floors were still slick with moisture. I got to the block like usual, took the lift up and made my way down the corridor to their unit. When I reached the unit, I pressed the doorbell and the boy opened it up to let me in. I bent down to remove my shoes, and when I straightened up and was about to enter, I noticed the boy's eyes were peering over my shoulder, looking to my right. Curious, I followed his gaze. There was no one behind me, except maybe for another unit that was adjacent to his. But the door was closed. Did the neighbor open the door for a split second? Then I heard the boy ran inside his home. I spun around and indeed he was gone. I shook my head, thinking, what was wrong with that boy today? That day, his parents were not home, so it was just the two of us. I closed the door behind me and began to unpack my stuff. We settled down at the dining table and I started going through the math exercises with him. Maybe halfway through the session, I noticed he kept glancing over my shoulder. Just a quick little look. At first, I ignored it. Kids get distracted easily, but after the third or fourth time I asked, "Everything okay?" He nodded, but didn't say anything. And then I heard it. Sounded like slippers coming from the corridor outside the unit. I paused for a second, and he paused too. We both looked at each other. Then the sound stopped. I got up and walked to the front door. I looked through the peephole. No one. And then I opened the door slowly. The corridor was empty, not a single soul in sight. So I waited there for a moment. Nothing. Nothing but the hum of the corridor fluorescent light. When I returned inside, the boy looked up at me and said quietly, "You'll get used to it." "You'll get used to it?" I'm sorry?" "The sound of the footsteps. You'll get used to it." I was taken aback by his answer. Huh? Get used to it? Why? I'm already used to it. Isn't everyone? But I didn't understand what he meant then. I just smiled and tried to play it cool. Maybe it's a neighbor," I said. He shook his head. "But no one stays in that unit." My eyes widened. No one? You sure?" He nodded. His face didn't show any hint of expression. Again, I still didn't understand what he meant. so I closed the door and sat back down. We went back to the lesson, but I couldn't focus anymore. I kept thinking about the sound of those slippers, the slow and rhythmic shuffling of the feet. Then, just before we were about to wrap it up, I heard it again. Closer this time, like someone was walking past the front door. I looked at the boy, but he didn't seem to hear it, or perhaps he didn't seem to be bothered by it. I stood up and approached the door. As my hands were about to open the door, I jumped. I looked at the boy, and he had this blank expression on his face. I turned back to the door, and then back to the boy. The doorknob was still rattling. So I began to peer at the peephole. There was absolutely no one outside the door. Despite that, why was the doorknob still rattling? It definitely was not the wind. The doorknob rattled as if someone wanted to enter the house. And then the doorknob stopped rattling. I was about to go back to my seat when I noticed something. A figure of a head at the neighbor's unit from inside their house. I pulled away and said, "Hey, you said there wasn't anyone at the neighbor's, but I clearly saw someone inside the house." "There's no one there." "No, I think you're wrong. Okay, I definitely saw someone there." "There isn't. I thought they were neighbors too, but it's just them." "Them," he said. I grew curious. Who was he referring to? What do you mean by them? The things that live there. People normally can't see them." At this point, I was so done with the conversation. Every answer I get raised more questions. I shook my head and I tried to forget the entire conversation. In fact, I tried to forget the entire experience. When it was finally time to end the session, I packed my stuff and began to leave. As I opened the door, I noticed that the neighbor's door was opened. Aha! I thought to myself, I was right. People were living there. As I wore my shoes, I quickly stood in front of the house and began to peer inside. I looked left, right. I wanted to prove to the boy that he was wrong. "You shouldn't do that," the boy said. "No, see, people are living there," I exclaimed. As I began to peer inside, I noticed a glimpse of a woman in white just zipping by in front of me. I jumped backwards, falling down on my rear. Then the door slammed shut. What on earth was that? It usually doesn't like people looking inside the house. "Be careful on your way home. Don't let them follow you," the boy said as a matter of fact. I stood up, brushed off the dust that was on my clothes, and I shook my head. I gave him this very confused look. What on earth is up with the boy's entire demeanor? I tried not to think too much of it and began to leave. The entire time I was on the bus home, the boy's words kept ringing in my head. And despite how much I want to forget his words and the entire experience, it always comes back to me. Why am I afraid? Surely it was one huge prank, or perhaps it was just a coincidence. Perhaps he was just trying to scare me when there's nothing to be afraid of. When I arrived home, I threw my bag onto the sofa and went straight for a shower. I just wanted to wash the whole evening off me. After that, I made a simple dinner, switched on the TV, and tried to relax. And to be frank, it worked. For a while, I completely forgot about everything. Then I heard it. That slow, rhythmic shuffling of feet. It was right outside my front door. I didn't think too much of it. Probably the neighbor that's coming home, I thought. So I continued eating. A few seconds later, still there. Then it went quiet. I took another bite. Again. Except this time, it sounded like someone was walking past my unit. It sounded like they were walking back and forth outside my door. I placed my spoon down. What is this? I waited. And there it was, going back the other way. By then, I was getting more annoyed than anything. I walked over to the peephole, mouth still full, and looked outside. Nothing. I stood there for a few seconds, food still in my mouth, and I was slowly chewing it like I didn't want to make a sound. I was wondering if I'd catch a glimpse of whoever was walking outside my unit. As I waited for some time, no one came. Maybe whoever was walking past had taken the lift down. As I began to pull away from the peephole and turn around, there it was again. I froze. The footsteps came again, back and forth, to the left, and then moving to the right, and then moving to the left again. I was about to turn around and look at the peephole. The doorknob shook. My whole body jolted. I was immediately reminded of the same scene at the boy's house. No way. Then the boy's words came back to me. They don't like it when people look inside their house. Be careful on your way home. Don't let them follow you. Thinking about it now, the next step I took made no sense at all. But I slowly approached the peephole. I leaned in to peer outside. I expected to see nothing. Instead, several women in white dresses were standing outside looking at me. Their long, dry, black, and unkempt hair covered their faces. None of them moved an inch, but more surprisingly, none of them seemed to touch my doorknob. Yet it continued rattling. I stumbled backwards and screamed. I didn't want to see anything else. I ran straight to my bedroom and locked the door. I climbed up my bed and covered myself with a blanket. It's over now. I was cowering under my blanket when I heard these tapping sounds coming from the window. Knocks. I lived on the 9th floor. There is absolutely no way anyone could come up to my bedroom window and tap it. I didn't dare to remove my blanket. I just stayed there, unmoving. I held my breath slightly, as if the slightest exhale could give away my position. Then I heard a faint whisper calling out my name. Iman. 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 The tapping of my window grew increasingly louder. I pulled the blanket tighter over my head and started praying. Please, please just leave. Please just go away. I don't know how long I stayed there. 5 minutes? 30? An hour? It felt like the night had stopped moving. Every time I thought the tapping had stopped, it would start again. Every time I thought the whispering had gone. Iman. Iman. It would come back. By then, I wasn't even trying to sleep anymore. I was waiting for morning, waiting for the birds to chirp, waiting for the sun to shine through my window, waiting for the hauntings to stop, waiting. Then, out of nowhere, it stopped. 5 minutes? Maybe 10? It stopped. I believe I was in the clear. Despite that, I refused to remove the blanket over my head. It wasn't gone. The soft tapping of my window had gone into a full-on smacking. I gripped my blanket even tighter and was shaking uncontrollably. Even the whisper of my name had changed. It's now this low, guttural voice that calls out to me. Iman. 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 I had to stay awake. I was terrified that if I fell asleep, whatever was outside would somehow find its way in. So I fought it. I forced my eyes open. I kept listening. I kept praying. But after hours of doing nothing except lying there, shaking under my blanket, my body eventually gave in. I don't remember falling asleep, only that I woke up. I slowly removed the blanket over me. It was morning. The sun's rays streamed through my window, illuminating my entire room. My movements were slow and heavy. I felt my body burning up. I took up my thermometer and checked my temperature. True enough, I had a fever. I called the boy's parents and let them know I had a fever and wouldn't be able to teach him anytime soon. In fact, I told them to find a new tutor. They didn't protest, which was surprising. They were very understanding. Ah, I see. Well, take care now. I hope they don't disturb you anymore. They? Hello? Hello? All right. The following story is from Norman. He says he has a friend named Azman who worked as a security officer and has a lot to tell about paranormal activities. His friend often works the night shifts. This is one of the stories he told him when he first started out. Osman used to work night shifts as a security guard at a commercial building in town. It started off as just another slow night. Osman was stationed in the control room, which had a panel of 6 CCTV screens. Most of the building was pitch black at night except for some emergency activated lights. Around 2:45 a.m., he noticed something weird on camera 3, the one that overlooked a corridor near the emergency stairwell. A figure was walking down the hallway. Looked like a young woman. Which was weird because the building was supposed to be closed. No one was supposed to be roaming around right about now. Was she stuck? Maybe she fell asleep somewhere or was unconscious and then, woke up? But the strange thing was, she wasn't setting off any motion-activated lights. The hallway remained dark, with no light flickering, just her figure walking in complete silence. Then she disappeared right before the camera at the end of the hallway. No corner to turn to, no door to open. She just vanished. Osman stared at the screen for a bit before switching to another camera. That's when his heart dropped. The other camera showed the same corridor but from a different angle, and it showed that the woman disappeared at the end of the hallway. So Osman switched back to the previous camera, which was camera 3, in case she walked back to where she came from, but she wasn't there. He began checking all nearby camera angles. Nothing. It was like she was whisked away. He had a partner that night and was out patrolling, so Osman radioed his partner, Tan, to go and check the stairwell.
Huh? You want me to go and check the stairwell?
Yeah, wait, no, it's not the stairwell, it's the corridor near the stairwell. You see, I saw a woman earlier, and basically she was walking down a corridor and then she disappeared. And I tried to look at the different camera angles. I don't see her anymore, so I just need you to go there and check it out for me. Is that okay?
Yo.
Tan let out a long sigh over the radio. Osman could hear the reluctance in his voice. Eventually, he agreed. When Tan stepped outside the emergency stairwell, the motion-censored lights turned on, brightening the area. Hey, Tan, how? You see anyone?
No one here.
Strange, Osman thought. Then, on camera 3, Osman saw the same woman walk past Tan. Tan, turn around. There, she just walked past you. Tan quickly turned around, and Osman watched the feed closely. When Tan turned around, he looked left, right, up, and down. When Osman saw this, he thought that why does it seem that Tan couldn't see the woman that just walked past him? And then Tan radioed in.
Hey, there's no one here. Ayo, hey, very scary here lah. Wah, suddenly so cold. Wah.
Wait, you didn't see her? She was just right behind you. She just walked past you. You didn't see her? Really?
Don't have. There's really no one here. Hey, I know what a woman looks like, okay? Hey, I think you just seeing things lah.
Osman had a hard time believing the fact that Tan couldn't see the young woman that walked past him earlier. He knew what he saw. So if Tan really couldn't see the woman that walked past him, then what did Osman saw? It can't be a glitch in the system. That's not how CCTV work. Osman tried to come up with some sort of logical explanation for all of this, but no matter how hard he tried to come up with a reason, it was never enough to convince him. So then, how does one explain something as strange as this? He can't. And he believes that no one can. Osman watched the security feed. Tan rubbed his hands before briskly walking away from that location. It took a while for Tan to make his way from the emergency stairwell to the security booth. Eventually, Osman heard a knock at the door. "Ah, Tan, come in." No response. No sound of the door opening too. "Tan, oi, come in." Strange. Why did Tan need to knock? The security booth wasn't locked. So Osman went and opened the door. When he did, there was no one there. He peered outside, looking to the left, then to the right. There was no one. Confused, he began to close the door and went back to his seat. "Tan, hey, stop playing around, okay? It's not funny. Look, I understand that sending you to the corridor near the emergency stairwell is a very scary experience. I understand that it's dark and yes, I get it, okay? But I am not making this up. I saw that woman, okay? Now stop playing around. Come inside. We'll watch the security feed together and I'm gonna prove you wrong." Annoyed, Osman got up and quickly opened the door. He peered outside. And again, there was no one. He shouted for Tan to stop playing and come back. Osman assumed Tan was playing a prank on him. Osman got back to his seat. Then the door opened. Osman was facing away from the door by this point. His attention was on the CCTV screen. He wanted to play back the footage he saw of the woman that walked past that corridor. Before Osman could play back the footage earlier, he noticed that on the live camera, he saw Tan was in one of them. Osman's eyes widened. Wait, if that's Tan, then who was the person who just entered the security booth? He quickly spun around and took out his baton. No one. No one was inside the security booth. Osman looked around the booth just in case it was the same young woman from before. Maybe she was hiding inside the security booth. So he looked under the desk and behind some boxes everywhere in which a human could hide. Nothing. Eventually, Tan entered the booth and was surprised to see Osman whipping out his baton. And then Osman told him everything. Tan gave a concerned look and said, "Oh, tonight very happening, huh?" Together, they played back the CCTV footage at the corridor near the emergency stairwell. When they did, there was no such woman that was being recorded. Even when Tan reached the area, there was no woman that walked past him. Then they both watched the footage that was angled from outside the security booth. Again, there was no one outside. Only that Osman kept opening the door and peering out. But as they watched the footage longer, they noticed that at one point, the door swung open and neither Osman nor Tan was at the doorway. Let's continue to another story. So, I grew up in a kampong in Malaysia. Proper village life, you know. Wooden houses on stilts, roosters crowing in the morning. Life back then felt like a long holiday. I was a kid with no real responsibilities. Just running around, climbing trees, playing with my friends, catching fish. Simple times. Of course, now that we're adults, we know better. Bills, deadlines, the whole reality check. But this story isn't about that. This one's about something that happened when I was still a kid. Something I'll never forget. It was one of those quiet, humid nights. Everyone in the house was asleep. I remember I was sleeping soundly when suddenly I was jolted awake. There was this loud shriek, sharp, piercing, a woman's scream, but not like anything I've heard before. It was almost unhinged. Then came the sound of footsteps, bare feet pounding across our wooden floorboards. It echoed throughout the house. And then I heard my dad's voice yelling, "Ya Allah!" and my mom crying out something I couldn't make out. Then my father shouted to my eldest brother, "Ambilai, cepat, cepat!" meaning, "Go fetch me some water. Hurry!" I heard him rushing to the kitchen, and then more footsteps followed. People were moving all around, and then it came. That laugh. It wasn't just a laugh. It was a banshee-like wailing laugh that bounced around the walls of the house, high-pitched but broken. It cracked halfway like she was gasping or choking in between each breath. It rose and fell like waves, hysterical then guttural. It sounded less like someone being happy and more like someone who had completely lost it. Like something inhuman trying to mimic laughter. I crept out of bed. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I opened my bedroom door slightly, heart thumping in my chest. I then slowly scanned the surrounding with one eye, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Almost everyone was gathered in the living room. My mom was trembling, hiding behind my dad. My eldest brother was holding a jug of water, shaking as he poured it into a glass. My younger siblings were nowhere in sight, probably hiding with my grandmother in her room. And there, at the far corner near our entrance door, was her. She was crouched, half shadowed by the door frame, head tilted sideways like a broken doll. Eyes wide and wild, her long messy hair clinging to her face, and she herself was scanning everyone with this twisted expression, like she was amused. She stayed there, smiling at everyone. Her head twitched from side to side in short, jerky movements like almost she was dancing to music only she could hear. Then her eyes locked onto me. Even though I opened my door just slightly, she somehow noticed that I was observing her. She gave me this wide grin. Then she dropped on all fours and charged at me. "Naim, run!" my mom screamed, but I was frozen. I couldn't move. I just stood there, wide-eyed, as she sprinted toward me. When I finally snapped out of it and tried to shut the door, I was too late. She slammed right through. I couldn't stop her. I fell back onto the floor. And then she was on top of me, breathing heavily. That same grin on her face, and then in this deep and raspy voice that didn't sound like hers at all, she said, "Kau panggil aku gila." Basically what she said was, "You call me crazy." The way she dragged her last word, it was like the word itself was rotting in her mouth. Before I could scream, my dad came running in and threw the entire glass of water straight at her face. Panas, panas. Basically, what she said was, "It burns! It burns!" Then 2 other men from the village barged in and helped hold her down while my dad kept reciting verses after verses from the Quran. Ustad, call the Ustad!" one of the villagers shouted. My dad sprinkled more water, then wiped her face with it, and she screamed even more. The Ustad finally arrived and recited some prayers. And even though 2 grown men was holding her down, she was somehow able to overpower the both of them. She writhed in pain and tried to break free, but the 2 men never gave up. And slowly she began to lose strength. Eventually, she collapsed. "Give this to her to drink. Get her family members out here and tell them to watch her. We don't want her to break free again." The Ustad gave instructions. One of the men nodded and ran to get the woman's family members over. When they arrived, they were all in shock and apologized profusely. They then carried her out and followed the Ustad's instructions. When everyone left, my mum ran to me and asked if I was okay. I just nodded and cried. She hugged me tighter. That night, we all stayed in one room and locked the doors and window. So, who was that woman? You see, Knox, I recognized that lady. She was what some kids and I dubbed her the crazy lady. The kids and I would often make jokes about her. Whenever we passed by her house, we would sometimes shout, "Oi, perempuan gila!" Basically meaning, "Oi, crazy lady." Then we ran away before anyone found out. It was all fun and games. We called her the crazy lady because every single night we'd hear her screaming, crying, laughing, and sometimes shouting at her family members. Other times she would hurl furniture or some cutleries around the house. One evening, I happened to walk past the house by myself, and then I saw her just standing in front of the window. She didn't show any hint of emotion, just a blank expression. I just nodded at her and waved. She didn't acknowledge me. Then, slowly, the corners of her mouth curled upward into a smile. And to me, it didn't look natural. It felt forced. But I didn't think too much of it, so I looked forward to watch where I was going, and when I glanced back, the window was empty. I didn't stop to look again. I just quickened my pace and headed straight home. Strangely enough, during the day, she seemed almost normal. She'd water the plants, sweep the front of her house, and occasionally greet people walking by. Then there are times where she just stood in front of her house, just watching it, completely nothing. But after dark, it was a completely different story. That's when her screaming, crying, and laughter would begin again. It was that contrast that unsettled everyone the most. You never knew which version of her you'd run into. Whenever I asked my parents about her, they just said, "Don't interact with her. She's lost it." But we kids being young and foolish, we used to laugh about it and call her crazy. We even made a little rhyme about her. I remember one time one of the kids, we shall call him Amir, got really serious and told us to shut up. He said, "Hey, enough! The rest of you should shut your mouths." I heard that she got cursed by black magic. We all stopped. Black magic? Yes. Apparently, some guy who was already married fancied her. When the wife found out, she contacted a bomo or a shaman or witch doctor and then cursed her. None of us knew if this was true, but the way he said it, We all just kind of believed him. I did, at least. From that day, I stopped making fun of her, just in case. But evidently so, I was too late because of the events that unfolded in my house. I never knew how she got into our house, and for many years, no one ever told me. It wasn't until much later that I finally asked my parents what had happened that night. That's when they told me. She had climbed in through one of the back windows. It had been left wide open and there were no signs of forced entry. She quietly made her way to my parents' room and stood beside my mother's bed. Then she reached out and began stroking my mother's face as she slept. That's when my mum woke up screaming and the commotion jolted my father awake. Sometime after that incident, I was told she sought help from an ustad who was said to possess a great spiritual knowledge. Whatever happened after that, things changed. The screaming stopped, the crying, the late night laughter, all of them disappeared. She never stood staring from her window again as well. Not long after, she moved away from the village, probably to start a new life. Alright, those were some pretty heavy stories. Let's take this opportunity to catch a break for a while. Let's listen to some short stories before we get back to the heavy stuff. I had a very friendly elderly neighbor who lived all by herself. She lived right next door to us for as long as I could remember. We weren't related, but both our families got along really well. My mum would chat with her almost every single day outside our flats, while the rest of us would greet her when we went to school or for work. Sometimes we'd exchange food we made for the day as well. Back then, my work was all the way at the other end of Singapore. The journey from my place to work was very far, so I had a routine. I'd wake up at about 4:30 every single morning, get ready and leave the house somewhere between 5:30 and 6. It was the only way to beat the morning rush on the buses and MRT. Coincidentally, that was also the exact time my elderly neighbor would be outside watering her plants without fail. And she did this every single day. I'd step out of my house to see her standing there with a watering can in one hand, gently sprinkling water over the pots lined neatly along the corridor. "Morning, auntie." And then she'd smile. "Hey, morning. You going to work already?" Yeah. Okay. Take care, Yeah, you too. And that was it. Nothing extraordinary. Just the same short conversation every single morning before I headed off to work. In the evenings, though, things were a little different. Usually, whenever I got home, she'd be sitting outside her unit enjoying the cool evening breeze. If I weren't too tired, we'd chat for a few minutes before I went inside. But one week, I noticed her door was closed. Maybe she was resting, I thought to myself. The next evening, still closed, then another, and another. I didn't think too much about it. She was elderly after all. Maybe she wasn't feeling well. Or maybe she'd gone to stay with one of her children. But the strange thing was, every single morning she was still there, watering her plants, smiling, greeting me before I left for work. And life carried on like that for about 3 weeks. Then, one evening, while my mum and I were having dinner, I casually brought it up. "Hey, how come I haven't talked to Auntie in so long? Every evening when I came home from work, she never really sits outside, does she? Her door is always closed nowadays." My mum stopped eating and looked up from her bowl. What do you mean?" "Well, you see, I always talk to her whenever I come home." "No, she passed away some time back." "Huh?" I gasped. "When?" Let me see. Let me see. 3 weeks ago, she went to the hospital. Then a few days later, she passed away, so that'll be Friday. Wait, are you sure about that? Because I always talk to her in the morning before I leave for work." "Huh? You spoke to her? Hey, are you sure about that? You see, her son came by the other day, to collect some stuff. They're gonna sell the house pretty soon. I don't believe her son is in the mood for pranks." My jaw dropped. Then, who was it that I spoke to every morning? I immediately pulled out my phone and checked my work attendance records. And then I started to count backwards. The day she went to the hospital, the day she passed away, the funeral, and the week her son came to clear the house. Everything matched. Every single morning after she had already passed away, I'd still see her standing outside, watering her plants, smiling and greeting at me. It was as if nothing had happened. Then, the next morning, when I left for work at the usual time, this time and forever, my neighbor didn't appear anymore. Let's continue to another story. I've been driving a taxi for years, and if there's one thing this job teaches you, it's that every passenger has a story. Some are funny, some are heartbreaking, some are quiet so you don't get anything out of them. And then there are the ones you never quite find an explanation for. This happened during one of my late night shifts. It was well past midnight. The roads were mostly empty, and I was driving through one of the quieter parts of Singapore when I spotted a woman standing by the roadside. She raised her hand. I slowed down and pulled over. She opened the rear door and closed it behind her. "Hey, good evening," I greeted her. She gave a small nod. "So, where to?" Instead of giving me an address, she said, "I'll direct you." Yeah, sure, no problem," I replied. She had a soft voice, calm, polite. Every now and then, she'd tell me to turn left, then turn right, then continue straight. And that was it. No small talk, and she wasn't using her phone or wearing any headphones, just silence between each set of directions. About 15 minutes, I started recognizing the roads we were driving along. I frowned. This route. Hang on. This leads to the cemetery. I glanced at the rear view mirror. She was looking out of the window quietly, as though nothing was unusual. Part of me wondered if maybe she was visiting a family member who worked there, or was there a wake nearby? I mean, people have their reasons, so I didn't ask, but this late at night? I don't know what to think. A few minutes later, she spoke again. "Turn left." I did. "Go straight." The entrance to the cemetery came into view. My grip on the steering wheel tightened ever so slightly. Then she pointed ahead. "You can stop at the bus stop." There was indeed a lonely bus stop just outside the cemetery entrance. I pulled over. The meter stopped, and then she handed me a $50 note. The fare was about $17, but she paid me $50 note. I told her, hey, this is too much. She just said, keep the change. Oh, okay, thank you. You're welcome. She stepped out of the taxi, closed the door gently, and without looking back, started walking towards the cemetery. I didn't even watch where she was going. I quickly stepped on the pedal and sped away. By the time I got home, I convinced myself there was probably a perfectly reasonable explanation. I didn't want to think too much, so I just went to bed. The next morning, while having breakfast, I casually told my wife about the passenger. She listened quietly before chuckling. Well, at least she paid the fare. I laughed. Yeah, you know what? At least there's that. Without thinking, I reached into my pocket to take out the cash she'd given me. I wanted to show my wife. Instead, I froze. Hang on. The $50 note she gave earlier was nowhere to be found. In its place, just a handful of dried leaves. This happened after work one evening. It had been one of those long, mentally exhausting days. By the time I got home, I wasn't really paying attention to anything around me. I just wanted to get upstairs, shower, and sleep. I waited for the lift while mindlessly scrolling through TikTok. When the doors opened, I stepped inside without even looking. There wasn't anyone in the lift after all. I pressed the button to my floor and walked to the back, leaning against the wall, and continued scrolling. The lifts don't announce the floor numbers, and since I'm the only one in the lift anyway, there was no point at me looking up when the lift stopped. And then the doors opened. Without thinking, I stepped out. I took maybe 2 or 3 steps before something felt off. I finally looked up from my phone. Hang on. This wasn't my floor. The corridor looks identical to mine, but there were a few differences. For example, there was a large shoe rack that was outside one of the units. Someone had chained a bicycle near the lift lobby, and a children's scooter leaned against the wall. None of those things were on my floor. So I looked around to see what floor I was on, and then I noticed the 11th floor. 11th? I stay on the 12th. How did the lift stop at the 11th floor when I clearly pressed 12? I was about to take a step towards the lift when I heard it very softly. Wrong floor. I froze. Every hair on my body stood up. That voice, it didn't come from the corridor or inside any of the flats. It came from behind me, from inside the empty lift. I slowly turned my head, and I saw the lift was indeed empty. And then the doors began to close. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I sprinted straight for the staircase and ran up to the 12th floor as fast as I could. By the time I reached my unit, I was completely out of breath. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped my keys twice before I finally managed to unlock the gate. I rushed inside, slammed the door shut, and locked everything. I stayed by the door for a while. My legs were shaking. The entire time I was at the door, I was listening intently for any sounds coming from outside my unit, but there was none. I was lucky that whatever was in the lift with me didn't chase me down. All right, that's enough short stories for now. Let's dive into one last story before we end the night. You know how some people say fishing is a peaceful hobby? That it clears your mind? Yeah, it used to be that for me. So this happened maybe 6 months ago. I don't know. I was off work on a Friday and I thought, you know what? Why not just go for night fishing? It had been a while and the weather was perfect. Cool breeze, almost a full moon. It was just the right kind of quiet and temperature. I grabbed my rod, cooler box, a few baits, and drove down to my usual spot by the riverside, not too far from where the industrial area meets a patch of nature. It wasn't spectacular or anything. I got maybe like 4 or 5 decent sized tilapias. Not a feast, but enough for a meal. Anyway, I was packing up around 11ish when I saw something weird. It was right next to the rock I'd been sitting on. There was this little case, beautiful thing, black and gold with these intricate swirling patterns. I picked it up, figured someone dropped it. People always, they tend to get into the moment when they're out here. People forget their chairs, their phones, their bottles, wallets. Yeah, I've seen all of it before. So I opened the case. I expected to see maybe a compact powder kit because it looks, like a tiny pocket mirror. And I was right. There was this tiny mirror, perfectly clear, not even a scratch on it. Some girl's makeup mirror, I thought. It was pretty and kinda hypnotic. I don't know why I kept staring at it. I'm a grown man. What business do I have being fascinated by a pocket mirror? Anyway, I told myself, you know what? I just give it to my wife. She likes fancy stuff. So I tossed it in my tackle bag and left. When I got home, I was dead tired. I just brought the cooler box upstairs, stored the fish in the fridge, and knocked out on the couch. The next morning, I told my wife about the catch. I totally forgot about the mirror. She was more excited about the fish than anything else. So we cooked them up that night and we had a very nice meal. Days passed. Work got busy, life moved on. Then it happened. One night after work, around 10:30 p.m., I pulled into the multi-story car park like usual. The same routine. I parked on level 3, grabbed my bag, locked the car, and walked towards the lift. That's when I bumped into my neighbor, Daniel, an older guy, very friendly chap. We always exchange small talk. "Hey, long day, bro?" he asked. "Yeah, tell me about it," I laughed. Boss acting like the entire company is going to close down tomorrow or something like that. But the whole time we were chatting, I noticed he kept glancing behind me. And it wasn't like, he was trying to sneak in those glances. He was very obvious about it as well. Eyes flickering over my shoulder again and again, and his smile started to fade too. Then I stopped mid-sentence. "Hey, Daniel, you okay?" He didn't answer at first. He just pointed. "Is that your car?" I turned around and looked. "Yeah. Why?" "Okay, then who's that in the back seat?" My stomach turned. "Huh? What? Huh?" He pointed again, now frowning. "That woman. Is she a wife? Because she looks really angry. I mean, you left her in there for what? It's hot inside. Bring her out." I felt this cold wave crash through me. My throat dried up. I squinted at my car. No one. There was absolutely no one there. I turned back to him. "Hey, what girl? I'm not seeing anything." Daniel looked at me, confused. "There, the one sitting in the middle. Long black hair, white blouse. She's there." So in order to stop this assumption once and for all, we walked to the car together. I opened my back door. And surprise, surprise, empty. Daniel blinked, and then he stepped inside, looking at the passenger seat, the driver's seat. He looked like an officer trying to inspect my vehicle. And then he said, I swear I saw someone here. I laughed, but he came out nervous. Maybe you're tired, or perhaps the light's playing tricks on you, I don't know. I mean, yeah, you know what? Yeah, maybe. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks. We both laughed and walked back to the lift and went home. The next couple of days passed without much issue until one fateful night. The next night after work, I was driving home again. My eyes were tired and slightly strained. I was just zoning out with the radio playing softly. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was something on the radio, a weird sound effect maybe, but the station was just playing soft jazzy music. Then I stopped at the red light. No other cars were around, and I heard it as clear as day. A soft, heartbroken sobbing from the back seat. I froze. My finger gripped the steering wheel tight. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror. She was there. Long, disheveled hair covering her face, white dress sitting in the middle, her head tilted downwards, sobbing. I looked away, heart racing, but my eyes, they kept glancing back, and I could still hear the sobbing. Then it stopped. The silence was worse. Somehow I can feel her presence. And somehow, even through the silence, even though she wasn't saying it out loud, it was as if she was speaking through my mind, saying, "Look, look at me, look." My hands trembled. I didn't want to look, but try as I might, somehow it felt like she had this power over me. And I looked at the mirror. She had lifted her head, and she was staring straight into the rearview mirror, looking at me. Her face was pale, her mouth ever so slightly parted, her eyes dark and endless. I jumped in my seat. I looked forward, green light. Still stunned, I didn't move. I snapped out of it, stepped on the pedal, and drove off. Then the car overtook me, and the driver rolled down his window and gave me the finger. But just as he did, I saw that his eyes started to look towards my back seat, and I saw his face. His expression had changed. He was visibly angry at first, and then I noticed his face changed to being terrified. His eyes were wide. Then he sped off. Did he see her too? When I reached the multi-story car park, I parked the car and jumped out, heart still pounding. I slammed the door, locked it, and hurried to the lift. Then I looked back. She was still there, at the back seat, unmoving. She just stared straight ahead. I jabbed the lift button repeatedly, nearly breaking it. Then I glanced behind me. and I saw her slowly turn her head towards me. So I turned back to the lift, jabbing my fingers onto the lift button repeatedly. And then I glanced back and she was still slowly turning her head. And then I looked towards the lift. This time I refused to look behind me. When the lift arrived, I ran in. The doors shut and I leaned against the wall, panting. What the hell was that? I rushed home, checking behind me like a madman in case she followed me. When I entered, my wife greeted me and asked, "Why are you sweating? Did you ran here?" I laughed weakly. Well, I'm trying to get some steps. Yeah, being healthy and all. She gave me that look. The look that she didn't believe me, but she didn't want to press it. That night, I couldn't sleep. And the next day, for the first time in forever, I took public transport. Then, I met up with a friend for lunch. Okay, so you're telling me, you saw a girl at the back seat and she was crying? And several days before this, your neighbor saw a woman? He said, eyes wide, halfway through his iced coffee. Yeah, I whispered. Twice. First, Daniel saw her. Then, several days later, I heard someone sobbing at the back seat. And when I looked at the rear view mirror, I saw her. And then there was this driver that was very angry at me. I believe he saw her as well. And then my friend leaned in close. Bro, two things. Either someone planted something in your car, or you picked something up. Planted what? I asked, genuinely confused. Well, cursed object. Maybe someone was angry with you. Well, I didn't bother anyone. Introvert, remember? Okay. Then did you pick something up? I frowned. When? I don't take random... I stopped. No way. The mirror? The one from the riverbank? My friend leaned back. What? And then I told him. His face went pale. Hey, you better get your car cleansed right now. A few days later, I called an ustad. When he arrived, he had these gentle eyes and a warm handshake. He began circling around my car, whispering prayers under his breath. And then he stopped. Astaghfirullah al-azim, he muttered. He turned towards me. There is something inside your car. It is very evil, and it's really powerful. It's attached to an object, but I'm not sure where the source is coming from. I nodded, feeling breathless all of a sudden. So, you told me you took something? Yeah. I took this mirror, by the riverbank, and I kept it. Okay, so where is it? I tried to recall where I placed it, and then I remembered. I placed it inside my tackle bag, and when I got inside my car, I took it out from my tackle bag and placed it in the glove box compartment. So I ran straight for my glove box compartment and I handed the ustad the mirror. Here, this one. The moment I held it, I can somehow feel her watching. The ustad took one look and nodded grimly. He began to recite certain prayers. The mirror then began vibrating. I threw the mirror on top of the hood of my car. My entire car, along with the mirror, was shaking violently. I stumbled back, heart in my throat. And then the ustad stepped forward, voice rising, verses upon verses. And then finally, Silence. He wrapped the mirror in a cloth. I will dispose of this properly, he said, but pray often. And remember, never pick up what is not yours. You never know what you might end up with. I think there is a lesson in that last story. Never pick up an object that does not belong to us. In fact, I'd go so far as to say never pick up a random object on the side of the road or anywhere on the ground and then giving it to your spouse as a gift. I understand the intention is pure, but I think buying them a gift is, way better. Yeah. Or if you are not the kind to buy them a gift, or your spouse hates buying gift, maybe you could DIY. Yeah. Right? Anyway, we have gone through a plethora of stories tonight. I hope you enjoy every single one of them as much as I have enjoyed narrating it to you. There are still many more stories in the archive that are waiting to be told. But for now, we rest. It's getting late. I shall see you in the next episode of the Phantom Archive. And I would like to humbly thank you for waiting so long for the release of episode 7 because it took way too long to produce. Until next time, fair winds.